Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, Chief Content Officer at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. This week in Illinois in Focus, we'll discuss a lawsuit filed by Republican lawmakers challenging the constitutionality of the Democrat-passed budget bill. We'll also discover measures that did not pass as the legislative session came to an end, and we'll preview Governor J.B. Pritzker's testimony before Congress next week. All that and more when we return.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. Republicans in the state legislature today, Thursday, filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the state budget that was approved over the weekend by Democrats. Joining me to discuss this is Illinois editor Greg Bishop. Greg, you wrote about this lawsuit. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so this all, of course, is from the final 2 days of legislative session where Democrats filed a gut and replace budget tax bill, budget implementation bill, a bond authority, and a slew of other legislation where they ultimately got across the finish line in short order. And Republicans today decided to file a lawsuit in Sangamon County challenging the Democrats on how they went about passing the budget bill. Now, Dan, this is going to get a little bit into the procedural weeds of how legislation is ultimately passed. Try not to sing any Schoolhouse Rock here, but when a bill is filed at the State House, in order for it to pass the originating chamber, let's say a House bill, we'll just make up a number, House Bill 10. House Bill 10's filed in the House. It has to be read 3 different days before it can be voted on to go to the Senate. And then when House Bill 10 is read 3 different days and voted and approved, it goes over to the Senate, where it also has to have 3 separate days of readings, where they just say House Bill 10, first reading, House Bill 10 on a different day, second reading, House Bill 10, third day, reading. The Republicans say that didn't happen with the budget. That didn't happen with the 3,300 plus page budget bill that was dropped on 6 p.m. May 30th when they were set to adjourn May 31st, giving Republicans, let alone their constituents, no time to review the thousands of pages. Because what they did is they took a shell bill that had passed out of the Senate already in the House. It was an empty bill, didn't really have anything in it at all, like a $2 appropriation to some fund. While it was an appropriations bill, it was a shell bill that passed out of the Senate to the House. Then while it's in the House, it gets its 3 readings, an amendment is placed on it, becoming the appropriations bill. And then you have it pass the House in short order, gets into the Senate on concurrence. So that's the process that Republicans say Democrats in the supermajority are gaming. They say that it's unconstitutional. It's an abuse of the 3 readings rule to do gut and replaces last minute to pass controversial legislation that requires taxpayer and constituent input. So they say that they only had about 30 hours to review the budget when the 1.7 million words that are in the budget would have taken them between 70 to 119 hours to give it a proper vetting, let alone, again, giving the taxpayers and the constituents the ability to actually see the budget and provide feedback. So will this lawsuit go anywhere? Surely there will be some action in the district courts. Will the Illinois Supreme Court actually hear this case and actually rule on it? There have been previous cases brought up challenging how the legislature uses the 3 readings rule or, as is alleged, abuses the 3 readings rule. And all of this was done, and it has been done, Dan, not just with this budget, It's been done with the Safety Act that brought about the end of cash bail statewide. It was done, the shell bill process, ushering things through in the final hours of legislative session during a lame duck session in 2023 with the gun and magazine ban. So this is something that the Republicans say is a pattern of abuse that the Democratic majority is using to stifle any possible debate and opposition to very controversial, and in this case with the budget, the most expensive state budget in state history at $55.2 billion.
Greg, you mentioned that this may be in the weeds of the legislative process a little bit, but it's important. It's important for our listeners to understand how it works. There is a three readings rule in place for transparency purposes, so taxpayers can weigh in on the process or the measure. In this case, the budget bill, and as you said, the largest spending plan in state's history that raises about $1 billion in taxes in fees on you and me and other Illinois taxpayers. When they use these shell bills, gut and replace them at the last minute, no one has a chance to weigh in. Not you, not me, not other taxpayers around the state, not interest groups, business groups, etc. It's an affront to all taxpayers across Illinois.
Well, and when they do this, Dan, we've seen this now. Here's just a couple of examples, even this year, really interesting example. But with the gun ban that was passed during lame duck session in January of 2023, that legislation that was gutted and replaced dealt with insurance or swimming pools or something to that effect, right? It didn't have anything to do with firearms, but they took this piece of legislation, gutted it, and replaced it, giving it a short-circuited approach to passing in just a handful of hours. Another piece of legislation this year that did not advance through the General Assembly, and we may touch on this in a different segment here, but the assisted suicide, or as the proponents called it, the Medical Aid in Dying Act, that was originally filed as a standalone bill, but they decided in the last week to gut and replace a bill that dealt with food sanitation. They gutted that and replaced it and tried passing the assisted suicide bill by doing a gut and replace for a food sanitation measure. So that in a way really does seem to confuse even just the regular taxpayer who wants to tune in and see what is going on at the State House. But when they see this flurry of guts and replaces at 11 o'clock at night on a Friday night, that's a real deterrent to people actually paying attention.
Yeah, Greg, as you said, this has been going on for years, maybe even decades. Infamously, now U.S. Congressman Mike Bost of Illinois, who was infamous for his video when he went nuts years and years ago, when then Speaker Michael Madigan and House Democrats did the same thing. I think it was with a budget bill. Back then, the video went viral. That sort of boosted his profile. So he left the Illinois State House and got elected to Congress. So my question is, though, since this has been going on for such a long time,
you know, I've been covering the State House for about 11 years now, Dan, and I've seen this before from Republicans. I can't remember if it was 4 or 5 years ago, but they attempted something similar, and the lawsuit didn't get that far. Not sure if this particular lawsuit has more beef to it, has more substance to it. It really does spell out the timeline of when the legislation was filed and the amount of hours they had to actually review the legislation. So it'll be interesting to track this and see just how far this lawsuit goes, and if it does anything to at least inform the general public of how legislation becomes law and how some people accuse Democratic supermajority of abusing the process.
Greg, let's talk about some of these bigger measures that did not make it through the legislative session, which ended before there could be final votes on them. You mentioned aid in dying, assisted suicide. Let's start there.
Yeah, and that measure brought a lot of really hard to listen to debate with proponents reading letters from constituents about how they have terminal cancer and they want to have the decision as to how they end their life rather than their life being taken away by the cancer. But then you had the likes of Bill Howder, a state representative, Republican from Morton. He is an emergency room physician. And he stood up and said that this is something that is going against the Hippocratic Oath of first and foremost, do no harm. And he believes the medical establishment is not in favor of this, and also said that this is a way to devalue life. And it's the people who are the most vulnerable who would be given this option. But he said that really this is something that seems to be more that's going to help insurance companies save money if they have to, allow for this. So there were a lot of spirited debate. But while it passed the House, it was never called for the Senate to vote on before they adjourned at the strike of midnight, May 31st.
Another piece of legislation that did not pass was a bailout of Chicago mass transit agencies that are facing a $770 million shortfall in 2026. What's going to happen here?
It's a great question because that measure, while it passed the Senate, it did not get called on for a vote before that midnight deadline, May 31st on Saturday. And Dan, I want to make sure that people are clear here. While this measure that didn't advance had a $1.50 tax per retail delivery and a tax on EV charging suppliers, it didn't pass. But that doesn't mean taxes aren't going up. Part of the budget bill that did pass and the revenue package that passed to pay for it was a 45% tax on tobacco products, including those nicotine pouches, which is just nicotine salts. So taxes going up on that. Taxes going up on cell phone plans. Taxes going up on certain types of hotel rentals or hotel type rentals like Airbnbs. You've got a slew of different corporate taxes where they're going to be capturing more corporate taxes. So all that passed as part of the budget, about $1 billion of increased taxes, fees, and collections. But the part to help bail out CTA, RTA, and mass transit in the Chicagoland area, and even parts of downstate, they would have gotten some of these funds. That measure didn't pass, so no tax on the retail delivery at this point. Now, of course, mass transit's saying that they're going to have to slash services, and there could be potential, a lot of firings going on. Others arguing they should just increase their rates for people who actually use mass transit. So will this be an issue that comes up during a spring, or rather a special session this summer, or is it going to have to wait until the fall? Again, these are questions that we are also asking, but we'll be on top of it at the Center Square to watch more.
Greg, the horse racing industry for years has struggled to keep up with expanding gambling options everywhere. There was a measure in the legislature this year that would allow horse racing facilities to expand their other gambling opportunities, but that failed to pass as well.
Yeah, and again, this is something that I've seen happen every year where the horse racing industry at the final few days, the home stretch, so to speak, they hold news conferences, they take part in committee hearings, they push for more expansion of what they're able to do, pushing that it's going to help the economy. But it always seems to come at the last minute when the pressure's on. And for years, they've done this. There have been some instances where they get some wins, but as of today and this particular spring session, they couldn't get it across the finish line. So that's likely going to have to be something that waits.
One thing that Republicans criticize Democrats for is not advancing legislation that would address what they consider to be an energy crisis. Energy costs are expected to rise significantly this summer for something as simple as turning the air conditioning on in your house. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, so several years ago, the legislature and the governor approved and enacted legislation and law that would essentially leave the state relying more on so-called renewable energy like wind and solar. And it's even looks to phase out coal-fired power plants over the next 5 to 10 years. And the legislature approving this several years ago, now we look back on it, and Republicans are frustrated that they see energy prices continue to go up. with the rationale being it's because of not having baseload energy. We're having to import more energy, over reliance on renewable energy. So Republicans were pushing for, and a lot of industry leaders were pushing for, expanding nuclear energy, for instance, or trying to roll back some of these, clean job initiatives for solar and wind so that we can get back to focusing on natural resources that Illinois has, like coal and natural gas, and really trying to roll back some of those coal restrictions. Nothing of that sort happened at the State House. There was virtually no energy legislation discussed. Even the governor had said that he was interested in lifting the cap on the nuclear moratorium entirely, but not even that was brought forward all the way. So it's likely going to have to be something where consumers are going to feel that pinch of increased utility prices this summer for Ameren and ComEd, both expecting to see higher prices for their consumers. And maybe if there's a chorus of consumers upset about this, something could be done. But will the solution out of the Capitol be more clean energy, or will it be rolling back some of the what Republicans say is onerous restrictions on Illinois' natural resources?
Yeah, I think I can predict which one that's going to be. Greg, actually, a law that was passed by last year's legislature is being put on hold while it's challenged in court. And that's the swipe fee law that would prevent banks and credit unions and other credit card owners from charging a swipe fee on things like tips and on taxes and tips. That's been put on hold, though. It was set to go into effect July 1st, I think. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and this was part of the budget that was approved last year. And it was an agreement that the Retail Merchants Association had with the state legislature and the governor to support ending swipe fees in exchange for another increase in what retailers have to pay when it comes to collecting taxes for the state. So the swipe fee fight, you had the retailers come out and say this is good, this is going to save consumers. But the banking institutions, they said this is going to cause chaos in the system. They filed a lawsuit in federal courts, and you even had a federal agency file an amicus brief highlighting how Illinois' law, which is the only law in the country that does this, would essentially cause for confusion in the systems. They'd have to bifurcate each purchase to be purchasing the goods, and the swipe fee can be used and added to the price of the goods. But then they'd have to bifurcate that and have a separate tally for the taxes and any gratuity that wouldn't have a swipe fee on it. And Illinois would be the only state doing that. Well, a judge did come out and say, well, we're not going to have the swipe fees go into effect for banks that are outside of the state of Illinois that operate inside Illinois. But the swipe fee would still be in effect for state chartered banks that only operate in Illinois. So after all of that, and the case is still pending, they're getting ready to do some oral arguments and more filings and briefs. The legislature went ahead and approved delaying the implementation of the Interchange Prohibition Act and the swipe fee measure that we're talking about here. So the governor will get that on his desk. It'll be interesting to see if he sits on it and it goes into effect by July 1st, or if he vetoes it, or if he signs it. So it's something that he fought for, something he defended, but now it looks like it's going to be on hold until maybe this court case is settled.
One of the still outstanding questions on this one is how you implement it. Anyway, do you have to pay for like taxes and tips in cash? Do you have to swipe twice? Was that ever figured out?
Well, I think both. Either you pay the extra in cash, or it would require you to possibly swipe twice. And that's what some of the credit card and banking institutions said was going to be a possible outcome as they tried to sort this out. But clearly that's not going to be something we have to worry about now, Dan. If indeed the governor signs this measure to delay the implementation of this, we'll watch how this plays out in court.
Greg, after the U.S. Supreme Court this week declined to hear a gun ban case out of Maryland, Illinois' gun ban, which we referenced earlier, is one of those gut and replace bills that was passed a couple years ago. That could be for next in line. Is that what you're hearing?
Well, this is fascinating, Dan, as we've been covering this story for, now 2 years, going on 2.5 years, to watch how far this has gone and all the different storylines that there are. Illinois' cases, several of them could be next up in front of the U.S. Supreme Court after the court denied to hear the case challenging Maryland's gun ban. And this was a case that they had sat on in conference for 16 weeks without putting out a decision. While that was being debated internally at the Supreme Court, you have the Barnett case of the Southern District Federal Court in Illinois, where a federal judge said Illinois' gun ban is unconstitutional. That's still in the appeals courts, with Friday being a day that the plaintiffs in that case are filing their response to the state, who had to respond to the district judge that it's unconstitutional. So that's the Southern District case in the appeals court, still pending. But Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court said we're not going to take the Maryland ban. Justice Kavanaugh actually wrote there are several cases that are still pending in the appeals court that they could possibly take up next, including the Viramontes case challenging Cook County and Illinois' gun ban. After the Supreme Court issued their ruling saying they're not going to take Maryland's case, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals put out their ruling on the Viramontes case and said that they side with the state on this. They sided with the district judge who had said that the law is constitutional. So the Viramontes case could be the next case in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. But some people are arguing that they should wait for the Barnett case out of the Southern District, saying that has a much stronger record, that it has a detail of the 4-day bench trial that we covered at the Center Square in the Southern District, and they feel that that's a stronger case to be put in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. All of this while the U.S. Supreme Court also signaling with a ruling that was released today, Dan, concerning Mexico being able to sue gun manufacturers in the United States. They shot that case down at the U.S. Supreme Court. And some of the language that the justices are using about the availability of AR-15s and different types of modern sporting rifles as an indication that the U.S. Supreme Courts may side on the side of the Second Amendment community when deciding ultimately these cases about gun bans. But we're still going to have to wait for the U.S. Supreme Court to actually take any kind of gun ban case up. And it could be from Illinois.
All right, Greg, one last story. In the last couple of minutes we have, Governor Pritzker is expected to testify before Congress next week about the state sanctuary laws. What do you expect from that?
Fireworks, Dan. I expect a lot of fireworks. You've got Pritzker joining 2 other governors from states that have migrant sanctuary policies. They're going to be grilled by members of Congress from both sides. You're going to have a lot of quotes and a lot of revelations that are going to be had. There's no doubt. Listen, the governor's got a tall task ahead of him because he's going to have to defend what has happened in the state of Illinois, everything from the Trust Act and the Way Forward Act that makes Illinois a sanctuary state, saying that state and local law enforcement cannot cooperate with federal immigration authorities. Plus, we just had an incident up in Chicago where Immigration and Customs Enforcement was conducting some kind of activity, and there were protesters, including some Chicago aldermen that were protesting. Police had to get involved to keep the peace of the protest, but some are saying that meant that the local police were getting involved with immigration authorities. So that's just happened as well. I think that's going to be a topic of conversation whenever the governor testifies next week in front of Congress, but clearly that's going to be must watch and must read, and we'll have plenty of coverage of it at thecentersquare.com.
I agree with you about the fireworks. That might be one worth watching. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson last year was called before Congress to testify and testified before Congress, and that one was pretty fiery too. So we'll see. Greg, thank you for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with all of the stories we talked about and more at thecentersquare.com.